All right, welcome back to As It Should Be. Paul Bertolino here, and well, it's time for a different kind of video, different from any video I've ever done before, but it's kind of a fun little video. Now, you guys all probably remember MySpace, right? And Friendster and all that kind of good stuff. And I think this kind of happened a little bit on Facebook too. But you remember maybe mostly like in the MySpace days, there would be a questionnaire that would be making the rounds, right? And everybody would be filling out the 20 questions, 25 questions, about me, to get to know me better, or whatever, that kind of stuff. And suddenly, for like a week, every single person that you knew on MySpace was posting the questionnaire with their answers to the questions. Well, this is kind of like the YouTube equivalent of that. This is, I first saw this, basically I got the idea to do this from Robert Fithen. Shout out to Robert Fithen. He put in his list. His most recent video is actually his list, and he got it from Rob Walker. Rob Walker of Rob Walker Let the Music Play channel. Now, Rob Walker is the one who initiated the questions. He's the one who came up with the set of questions, and there's 20 some odd questions here. 20 questions, and basically everybody in the vinyl community and people making YouTube videos, vinyl and music related YouTube videos, are putting up their videos answering these questions. And yeah, this is the first time I've ever done this, and actually I really wasn't aware that this was happening every year. Well, this is my first year, guys. All right, and all right, so why don't I just get started? We've got 20 questions here, and basically it's questions that are kind of really an excuse to show records. And anyway, let's get started. Okay, so question number 1. What is your favorite new release of 2022? Well, that is one question I cannot actually answer, because I can, but I'm not gonna. Because my last week's solo video, it was Monday, I guess it came out on Tuesday, but my last week's Monday video is my top 10 albums of 2022, and well, you're gonna have to watch that video to find out what my top album of 2022 is. Go on back, it's right down there. Okay, but barring that, let's go to number 2. What is the last band or solo artist that you saw live? Well, that would be Iron Maiden. Yeah, Iron Maiden. Yeah, I saw Iron Maiden in October in Newark, New Jersey at the Prudential Center. Now, the reason that I'm showing this particular album to represent Maiden in that show and everything, well, first of all, Peace of Mind was my first Iron Maiden album. Not this particular copy, but the first Iron Maiden album I ever bought at all, was Peace of Mind, but I got it when it was new in 1983. Now, and as a result, it kind of always has been my favorite. But now, this Iron Maiden show, let me get back to 83. This means, of course, that I've liked Iron Maiden since 1983. Now, strangely, throughout the 80s and any time after, I never saw Iron Maiden. This show in October is the very first time I ever saw Iron Maiden. I don't know how that happened. I don't know how that works. Somehow I've completely gotten around seeing them until now. Now, but the reason why I ended up going now, after all this time, why now? Why suddenly now? Why didn't you go in 83, 84, 85? Well, the reason why I went now is because I have a friend, Garrett Alarcon. Shout out to Garrett. He knows Dave Murray. He's a personal friend of Dave Murray's, and Garrett is from Hawaii. He's lived in New York for decades now, but he's from Hawaii, and Dave Murray has lived in Hawaii for God knows how long, and they know each other. So every time Iron Maiden plays in New York, Garrett gets 6, 7, 8, 10, whatever comps, and brings a bunch of friends along, and they go see Iron Maiden for free. And he does it all the time. Any number of times I've caught pictures on Facebook or whatever of a group of friends going to see Iron Maiden. Well, this time around, I was one of the friends that got to go. In fact, there's a little pass there, right? Yeah, so we all So we all piled up in a rented van and drove out to New Jersey. We all had to pony up like $40 or something each for the rental of the van, but okay, so that means I got to see Iron Maiden for $40. In 1983, that wouldn't have been such a good deal, but right now, And you know what? I'll tell you something. They kind of blew my mind. I mean, Iron Maiden, I couldn't believe how good they were. I mean, as far as I can tell, from not having seen them before, but any of you Maiden fans who've been going to see them since the 80s, you know this. You know this for sure, a lot better than I do. They're as good live as they ever were. They sound as good live as they ever have. Bruce Dickinson is as energetic on stage as he's ever been. He's running around, he's jumping around and going up on, elevated areas and doing all his swashbuckling routines and the whole thing, while still hitting every single note. The keys of the songs aren't brought down. I mean, like, he's still singing everything in the original keys and hitting every high siren note that he ever hit while running around. Like, he's not running out of breath, nothing. It's actually pretty fucking amazing. And yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of bands where if you haven't seen them yet, it's kind of like, well, at this point. But you know what, man? If you haven't seen Maiden yet and you've been go. I mean, they're as good as they ever were. Okay, so number 3 on this list is, it says their first album was the best. Well, I actually have 2 choices for that, because whenever I think of that, there are 2 albums that come readily to mind, and I'm going to show both of them to you. First off, Van Halen. Yeah, the first Van Halen album. I mean, spoiler alert, at some point I was going to do, and I probably still will do, a Van Halen ranking the albums. Well, this is the best Van Halen album. Come on. Girl, you know it's true. But, also, another example, the first Cheap Trick. Yeah, the first Cheap Trick. Ooh, man. Easily my favorite Cheap Trick. I'm not a really huge, go all the way through the whole entire run kind of Cheap Trick fan. I'm not one of those guys that has, Woke Up with a Monster and all that kind of stuff, and The Doctor and Lap of Luxury, and, makes excuses for them. I just don't own those albums. I just don't care. I mean, I'm basically a first album through Dream Police, kind of all shook up, and maybe, I can kind of do One-on-One and, early 80s stuff, but I really can't go on the whole ride with these guys. They have some more recent ones that are good, but really when it comes down to it, for me, it's all about the first album through Dream Police, and this is my favorite. Okay, so number 4, it says, hat trick, show the vinyl, CD, and cassette of an album. Okay, well, I kind of can do that, I kind of can't. Now, I don't have any cassettes. I never was a cassette guy, ever. I mean, at no point have I had the vinyl, cassette, and CD of an album, because I've never been a pre-recorded cassette guy. In the 80s and into the 90s, I had Maxells and TDKs, blank tapes I would buy, and I had countless comps that I would make, or I'd put albums on, one side would have, Headquarters, the Monkees, and the second side would have Pisces Aquarius, that kind of stuff. I would put albums onto blank tapes and make comps, but I never actually bought pre-recorded tapes. There's never been any time when that was my thing. It was always vinyl until I started buying CDs. And then there was a period when I only bought CDs for a while, but vinyl and CDs, it's always been. So I will show you, first up, an LP and a CD that I own, that I have. I mean, there are 1,000 examples, but I'm choosing this one example, and that is the first Aerosmith. And the main reason why I chose this really is because it's kind of cool that it's the original cover. Yeah, the rare original cover. And I'm actually always been really happy that they reinstated it for the CD, the 90s reissue of the CD. But yeah, so the first Aerosmith. But as a sort of extra added bonus to make up for the fact that I have no cassettes, I do also want to show you the vinyl and the 8-track of the Fonzie album. Yeah, that's right. Remember the Fonzie record? Come on. Fonzie. And all this really is a collection of 50s oldies, which came out probably in 74 or something like that. Yeah, just a way to kind of sell you an oldies album, but you put Fonzie's face on the cover. Kind of, do you remember? Does anybody remember Donald Duck Lemonade? You're a kid in the 70s, 80s, and you'd go into the frozen fruit section, and there'd be those little cylindrical sort of containers of Donald Duck lemonade. Well, all that was inside was just lemonade, right? But there was a picture of Donald Duck on the package. Well, that's what this is. Just a collection of 50s oldies with Fonzie's face on the cover. Okay, number five. Number 5 is show an album that starts and ends with the same letter. I'm assuming that's the title and not the band. Well, I have 2 examples because I thought of quite a few examples, but I couldn't decide which one of these I wanted to show, so I'm showing you both. First up, Escape by Journey. Yeah. See how that works? Escape begins with an E, ends with an E. Ooh, magic. Yeah, anyway, Escape. And my really, really trashed, beat up UK pressing of Roger the Engineer by the Yardbirds. Yeah, but it's an original. I mean, it's a flip back and everything, but it's pretty rough. I mean, it's a little. I think there's a little water damage, and somebody with the initials WL apparently owned this a long time ago. I don't know, but still, the record's actually not in bad condition, all things considered. The cover's in worse condition. Okay, so number 6. Born the same year as you. Okay, so born the same year as me. Well, you know who was born the same year as me? I'll show you who was born the same year as me. Little Ricky Seagull. Yeah, that's right. Little Ricky Seagull from the Partridge Family. All those shows back in those days, they had like the cute kids. You had the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family, and they had like the cute younger kids to kind of balance out the older kids. Well, at some point after these shows run for a few years, even the younger kids start to get older and unwieldy. And well, then they have to bring in another cute little kid to try to bring the ratings back up. And that always pretty much signals the last season of a show. Cousin Oliver from the Brady Bunch and Little Ricky Seagull from the Partridge Family. And on every episode, Ricky Seagull, of course, sang a song. And it was really annoying, and it was really terrible, and I always hated it. But there's a Little Ricky Seagull album on Bell Records, the same label that the Partridge Family come on. Yeah, and it's Ricky Seagull and the Seagulls, which is basically Ricky Seagull and his family. Like, his dad wrote all the songs, and, he's in on the deal. He's in on the action. Little Ricky Seagull, the little cash cow for, 6 months a year? I don't know. But anyway, Ricky Seagull. Okay, so number 7 is most listened to album in 2022. Well, I'm really not entirely sure, but if I had to guess, it would most likely be an album I've discussed a great deal on this channel so far, so you shouldn't be surprised. Young Gun Silver Fox with Ticket to Shangri-La. Yeah. Love this album. Now, I've talked at length about Young Gun Silver Fox on at least a couple of different episodes recently, or different videos, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing about them from me, so that's all I'm going to say. Okay, so number 8 on this list is most listened to artist in 2022. Now, like the last question, I'm not 100% certain, but if I had to guess, it most likely would be ABBA. Yeah. The thing is that in this past year, I did a really, really deep dive into ABBA. I mean, I had only been a casual fan for decades, up until this year, when I decided to do a deep dive into their catalog and do an album rankings video, and then I followed it up with a songs ranking video. And so for 2 weeks straight, I completely immersed myself in ABBA and all their albums, and became really familiar, bought every one of them. It got really, really nitpicky about exactly which copy I got off of Discogs and all that kind of crap. And this is my favorite of the lot. Spoiler alert for those of you who haven't seen the video, but yeah, Arrival. And I would say ABBA's probably the artist, or that I've listened to most in 2022. Okay, so number 9, Australian artist or band. Well, now, without question, no contest, my favorite Australian artist, AC/DC. Bon Scott era AC/DC. No contest. I'm sorry. no matter who else you want to throw out there. You can say, well, what about the Bee Gees? Well, are the Bee Gees Australian artists, or are they British artists? I don't know. I don't as readily put them in the Australian box there as I do AC/DC. Truly, truly Australian artists, AC/DC. But the record I'm going to show you is INXS. Listen Like Thieves. Yeah, and the reason why I'm showing this one is because I just got this album. I probably bought this maybe 2 weeks ago. 2-3 weeks ago, maybe. Now, historically, I never really was much of an INXS fan, especially in the 80s, because in the time when records like this were out, I was going through a metal phase, and my metal phase was definitely a phase. And so INXS, I wasn't into them, but looking back, and when I started going back and looking at all their hits and stuff, after I got past all that, after I got past the metal thing, I really always liked, they have a lot of singles that I always really liked, and out of all the bands that I really couldn't stand in the 80s, it's like, well, like the MTV kind of pop bands and stuff, INXS kind of was pretty good. And this album, I always meant to buy this album, because you look at the song titles on, this is a greatest hits album. Almost every, literally 2/3 of this album, you either there was a video on MTV or you heard it on the radio regularly. There's 3 songs on here you've never heard before if you don't have this album. And so I recently finally picked up a copy. Alright, so number 10 on this list, we have Surprising Purchase of 2022. Now, I don't, the example I'm going to give you, I don't actually have it, so it isn't actually really a purchase. It isn't something that I've actually purchased yet, but I should, and I intend to, and I have intended to since it came out this year, but, things slip through the cracks. I can't just immediately buy everything that I want here. But that record is, and I'm going to have to give you a pop-up, Rock Believer by the Scorpions. Yes, that's right. Rock Believer by the Scorpions. And, now this is another album that this is an album that I discuss on my favorite albums of 2022. Spoiler alert. So I'm not really going to go into it really deep on this video. Just watch that video and I'll blabber on about it. But yeah, I was really gobsmacked by how good this new Scorpions album was. They've been putting out records for decades that have just been okay, well, forget about Scorpions. And then finally out of nowhere comes this, and it is just, I was just completely shocked by how good it was. And I need to go buy it. Okay, so number 11, we have an artist/band you're complete on. Okay, well, man, there are a lot of examples of that, because I'm very much a completist. When I get into a band, if I decide I'm into a band or that I'm interested in collecting their albums, I'm a completist. That said, there are some major artists for me that I love. Some of my favorites good example, Elton John. Elton John is one of my very favorites. I have loved Elton John since I was 5. But you know what? There's a whole chunk of Elton's albums that I don't have. Basically, mid-80s through the 90s into about maybe 2000, whenever the Songs from the West Coast album came out. Basically, from Too Low to Zero until Songs from the West Coast. Nothing. There was just nothing there. I didn't buy Leather Jackets. I didn't buy, what's the Reginald Strikes Back or whatever, and, the Lion King soundtrack. Come on. And The One, and just all those out. No, I didn't buy any of those, and I still don't have them. So, strangely, as much as I love Elton, like I said, there's a whole chunk of his discography that I never bought. Queen is another example. Basically, I stop after the Game. No Hot Space, no The Works, no It's a Kind of Magic. Oh, come on. No. And I love Queen, but I just cannot go past the Game with them. Now, even Alice Cooper, you all know how much I love Alice Cooper, or some of you do. There's even a chunk of Alice Cooper's discography that I just didn't bother with, because when he went hair metal, you think about Constrictor. I mean, Constrictor came out after he'd been away for about 3 years. He had his in the early 80s. He had his blackout period, and then vanished for like 3 years. And then suddenly, in the middle of MTV, he's going to come back again, and he's got a new album out, Constrictor. I bought that day of release. Whew. Boy, did I hate that record. Well, boom. Next album comes out, Raise Your Fist and Yell, with that god awful cover, the really, really bad high school level painting of Alice's face painted on a fist. Yeah, you know what? I didn't bother with that one. You know, and then, yeah, so there's a bunch of Alice Cooper albums during that time that I just didn't buy. Anyway, all of that brings us to examples of bands that I am complete on. I mean, I'm not going to list them all because there's just too many. There's a gazillion of them. I mean, obviously the Beatles, you know, Jefferson Airplane, ABBA. I recently became completely complete on ABBA. You know, the Monkees, so many bands. You know, the Kinks. Yeah, you know, the list goes on. But the example I'm going to give you is The Who. Yeah, from the first to the most recent, and everything in between. I have every Who album, and every time, you know, every 5 decades when they put out a new album, I rush out to get it the minute it comes out. Yeah. I mean, being a completist with The Who is not that difficult because they've been making albums since 65, 66, up until just a couple of years ago, and they have 11 albums. So, being complete on The Who is not exactly a feat, but I'm complete on The Who. Okay, so number 12, it asks, a great run of 3 albums. Okay, yeah, that's a great question because now I'm realizing I'm not the only one who's noticed this. I've always felt like there have been a lot of artists who have, like, what I always refer to as the big 3. Just like that there's just that run of, yeah, there's a lot of artists like that have that run of 3 albums that just like, Probably the best example that comes to mind for me, and probably the ultimate example, is Bob Dylan. I mean, come on, Bring It All Back Home, Highway 61, and Blonde on Blonde. I mean, come on. But that is not what I'm giving as an example. I'm giving as an example the Kinks. Yes. And my big 3 of the Kinks is Face to Face. Yeah, I only have the CD here. I have the vinyl. Believe me, I have the vinyl. I probably have 4 copies of this because I'm pretty sure I have 2 monos and I'm pretty sure I have 2 stereos, but they're at my mom's. Something Else, and Village Green Preservation Society. That's the big just 3 albums of the Kinks. But the thing about the Kinks, though, is that you could say that the big 3 of the Kinks is Face to Face, Something Else, and Village Green, like I just showed you. Or you could go Something Else, Village Green, and Arthur. Or you could go Village Green, Arthur, and Lola. Yeah, but my personal big 3 is Face to Face, Something Else, and Village Green. Okay, so number 13, show an 80s soundtrack, an 80s movie soundtrack. Well, I have 2 here. I have 2. Well, okay, first off, I'm going to show you one that I recently purchased in a dollar bin. I bought this in the dollar bin because, as people who watch this channel know, I have the series Singles of the Year that I do with Crystal Durant and Tommy Von Voigt, and every week we count down our favorite singles of any given year, right? Well, I tend to go into the dollar bins of used record stores and try to find stuff that I can just put in the background on display, and just I could find something where the record's completely trash, but if the cover's presentable, then I'll buy it just to put it back there. I mean, I put my regular records back there too, but sometimes there's certain years that kind of need to be filled out because I don't have as much stuff, and the 80s were a good example of that. And so I bought this in the dollar bin just to show in the background of a couple of the videos, and that is the Miami Vice soundtrack. Yes, Miami Vice soundtrack. So it doesn't get more 80s than this. I mean, you want to talk about 80s soundtrack. I mean, this is the gold standard of 80s soundtracks. But possibly my favorite 80s soundtrack, Parade by Prince. Of course, this is the soundtrack for his film Under the Cherry Moon. And yeah, I mean, if I think about it, yes, even more so than Purple Rain. I love Parade more than I love Purple Rain. Sue me. Okay, so next up, number 14. We lost them in 2022. Yeah, well, there were a lot of people. I actually looked it up because, so many people, I feel like there are just so many people just dropping dead, so many huge celebrities dropping dead every single year, that after a while you get to the end of the year and you kind of forget about the people who died in January and February and March. And so I went back to look, and the list was staggering. And it was a lot of people, of course, that I had never heard of. But I made a little small list here of the ones that kind of meant the most to me, the ones that were kind of like the biggest hit to me. And that is Dino Danelli, the drummer from the Young Rascals. Oh man, I was so bummed about it. Like, he was like a really underrated, not a lot of people recognized what a great, he was a really great kind of showman of a drummer, but had all the chops. Like, one of the most underrated drummers of the 60s, Dino Danelli. Olivia Newton-John. I mean, I'm a child of the 70s. Like, Grease alone, you have to mourn Olivia Newton-John, but there's so much more than that. Have You Never Been Mellow, and Would a Little Bit More Love Make It Right, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I loved Elton John. I loved Elton Olivia Newton-John when I was a kid in the 70s, and I still love Olivia Newton-John, and I was sorry to see her go. Ronnie Spector. Oh man, that one. Yeah. Ronnie Spector. Oh man, Tom Bell. Basically, the man who invented the Philly sound. I mean, he is the Philly sound. Tom Bell, all those great Spinners hits. The list of great Tom Bell tracks it's too long to even mention. I can't even go into it. Look up Tom Bell, Thom Bell, if you don't know Tom Bell. But my pick of the one that absolutely hit me the hardest, and I still, even now, I'll have a thought like, oh my God, I cannot believe Christine McVie is dead. Oh man, and I made a video when Charlie Watts died. I made a video for that, and an R.I.P. Mike Nesmith video. I really should have done one for Christine McVie, because she's on that absolutely on that level for me, and she's my favorite member of Fleetwood Mac. And yeah, I cannot believe that Christine McVie. Talk about taking a huge chunk of my childhood and just doesn't exist now. Sorry, no more Christine McVie. Oh my God. Okay, so number 15, disappointing purchase of 2022. Now, the best I could come up with for this particular one, because I don't really do a lot of blind purchases. I don't really go out like I used to do, like you used to have to do when growing up in the 70s, and certainly in the 80s and everything, and in the 90s really. If you wanted to check out a band, you just had to buy the record and hope that when you got home and played it, that it was good. And I don't really have, I just don't really have that issue now. Most people don't, because all you have to do is go Spotify or YouTube or whatever and listen to the music and go, oh, do I like this? Oh, I like this. I'm going to go buy it. So I don't really have opportunities now to purchase things and then get home and go, oh, Jesus sucks. I didn't know. But I do have a disappointment of a record purchase, and that is when I purchased on Discogs a mono copy of Days of Future Past by Moody Blues. Now, I'm not disappointed by the album. This is long since I was 13. This has been one of my favorite albums. I wasn't disappointed by the mono mix, although I'm pretty sure that the mono mix is probably a fold down, because the whole point of this record was to show off the dynamic range of the stereo of DRAM, the label, right? So the mono is probably a fold down, but I always wanted to get one because I'd never seen one, and I thought all the reissues they do of this, and like the super deluxe and the multi discs they did of this album, the mono is just never there. Nobody talks about it, and I was always like, I suspect it's because it's a fold down, but I still have to get a copy because I want to know. So I went on Discogs and I bought one. UK mono Days of Future Past, and the reason why it's such a disappointment is just because, well, it's nothing to really show you. You can't really see it, but the record is trashed. I forget what it was. It was probably sold as like a VG Plus or something. In excellent condition, great condition. You get it home and it's like, it's virtually unplayable. It's possibly the worst condition record I ever purchased. And I didn't send it back because I had spent so many years wishing and wishing to get a mono Daze that I just thought, I'm just going to have it just to have it. Because it's not like I was going to play it really with any regularity anyway, because again, as I've said 50 times already, it's probably a fold down. So, yeah, so I was really bummed. I mean, this is one of those Discogs examples where you buy a record thinking it's going to be at a certain level of condition, and it turns out it looks like somebody pulled it out from underneath a truck. Okay, so what are we on here? Number 16. And number 16 simply says non-vinyl purchase. So I'm going to assume that means something I purchased in a different format. I didn't purchase any 8-tracks this year. I mean, the Fonzie 8-track I've had for a long, long time. As you might guess, I haven't purchased any pre-recorded cassettes this year. I've already explained that. I don't think I've bought... Have I bought any CDs? Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, yes, I have. The Super Deluxe CD edition of Revolver. Yeah, the 50th or whatever, the 50,000th anniversary of Revolver. Yes, I bought this. It's the full complete one with the book and, like 5 discs or whatever, and, the remix and the outtakes and the 5 point... does it have 5.1? I don't know. But yeah, the mono remaster. The lot, man. The lot. And, yeah, I mean... this is one of those controversial kind of... I still have the plastic on it, and it's gonna come off soon, I'm sure. It's kind of one of those controversial... It seems to be kind of a slightly controversial kind of release, because people get kind of up in arms about the remix and stuff, and it's like, well... I mean, whatever. I mean, the remix is never going to replace the original. Even Spotify might mix it up at some point, and but they do that. I mean, like, you go to Spotify and it's like, it says it's the mono mix of a certain track, and you listen to it and you're like, no, that is absolutely the stereo mix. They fuck that stuff up all the time. But really, when it comes down to it, these remixes are not going to replace the original. Not as far as my listening habits are concerned, and as far as, like, history is concerned. Come on. Because, I mean, yeah, it's just not going to happen. And I find that stuff really fun to listen to, because I feel like it's really kind of cool to go in and listen to these tracks with these new mixes where you can kind of pick up all these things that you didn't pick up before. It's almost like getting a little microscope and getting to look deeper into the tracks. So it's kind of more of a curio than anything, and I am interested in hearing it. It's just that the next time after I do hear it, that I go to reach for Revolver, I'm going to go reach for the original one. And of course, all the outtakes, all the demos and the alternate takes and everything. I'm a sucker for these things. And any kind of a Beatles release like this, you got me. I mean, you completely have me. Okay, fine. I won't have money to eat that week. That's okay. I have got to get the Beatles set the day it comes out. That's the way it is, man. Okay, so number 17. You found a grail. I found a grail. Did I find a grail? Well, not really. I didn't... I mean, I have grails, but I don't think I really found any, like, legit, like, real deal grails. But I did find a record that I'd been looking for, that I'd kind of been having a little trouble finding, but I just ran into in the wild, as they say, at a record store in Manhattan called Academy. There's an Academy Records in Brooklyn here, and there's one in Manhattan. And I was in the Manhattan store, and I was like, oh, shit, I can't believe I found Patty Drew. Tell Him. Yeah, Patty Drew with Tell Him, a great, obscure, mid-60s Northern Soul artist on Capitol Records. This is the mono issue of it. And Tell Him, if you don't know, I mean, like, go look it up. If you like Northern Soul, well, if you like Northern Soul, you probably know Tell Him, but if you like that kind of stuff and you don't know Tell Him, go check it out. You are going to like it. Great song, great album, and she's a great singer. She has other great albums too, but this is probably the best of the lot. Yeah. Okay, so number 18, we have a space-themed album sleeve or song. Space-themed album cover or song. Well, of course, Ace Frehley. Ace Frehley's 1978 Kiss solo album. Picture Disc edition, no less. It's because I don't have a regular copy here. I do have one. But yeah, I ran into this picture disc for like nothing one day. It was really cheap, like $5 or something. It's kind of in rough condition, but I just bought it just to have it because I never have had the picture disc. I remember seeing them as a kid in 78, 79 when they were new, but getting picture discs was beyond me when I was that age because I was like 8, 9 years old. So now, like, I'm satisfying the little kid in me and buying the picture disc of Ace Frehley's solo album. And by far the best of the solo albums. I know a lot of people say that, and it seems almost like hip to say that. Well, I'm sorry, sometimes the truth is hip. This is the best one. I'm sorry. Okay, so number 19, it says, show some VCLT or present. Now, I'm going to be really honest here. I don't know what VCLT means. I know VC means vinyl community, but I don't know what LT means. Tell me down in the comments what VCLT actually stands for. So I didn't actually, but I do know from watching other people's videos. I watched, I watched Rob's video and I watched Robert Fithen's video, and I did see that it was about sometimes people who are in the vinyl community send each other gifts and go, oh, you should check out this album. Here, let me send you a copy. And people receive in the mail records from other people in the vinyl community. Well, that hasn't happened to me. I haven't gotten that. But I will show you a gift, music-related, well, an actual music gift that I got this year for Christmas, and it is on display in the background here. The Dylan Mono Box. Yeah, my friend James, shout out to James Otero, he sent me the Dylan Mono Box for Christmas this year, and this is great. The Dylan Mono Box, it's little vinyl replicas of every album, like, tip-on back covers, and like the CD design is the same as the original label, the inner sleeves, the whole thing. And there are many, many, many things that are great about the set, but what's really great about it is I had never even thought, it's like duh, but I never even thought, John Wesley Harding in mono? Oh yeah, of course. Well, John Wesley Harding in mono, I've certainly never seen that on vinyl. And yeah, so Dylan in Mono Box. Okay, so we've come to the last one. This is a 20 questions, and we're at number 20 here. And number 20, it simply says, show an album released in 1973. Ask and you shall receive. Tower of Power, self-titled, 1973. This is actually the third album, but it's their first self-titled. Yeah, Tower of Power. Oh man, those first 3 Tower of Power albums, I am a huge, huge fan. Now, this copy I bought recently, I mean, I've had various copies of this album for decades, but I bought this particular copy recently because, and this is kind of a grail too, actually, now that I think about it, this particular copy had the t-shirt transfer. I don't know if this is going to show. Yeah. It came with a t-shirt transfer, and I didn't even know this really until like this past maybe a couple of years that this even existed. I mean, how many copies have I had over the years? And certainly none of the copies I've ever had have had this, and I was unaware. And luckily, not long after I became aware, I actually found one with it, because of course it was obviously eating me alive to know that I didn't have it. Well, now I have it. Not that I'm ever going to put it on a t-shirt. I would love to have this on a t-shirt, but, go to keep it mint, haven't I? All right, so there you go. Yeah, there's the 20 questions. It's called, actually, I don't think I said this at the beginning, but it's called the Vinyl Community Tag for 2023. Yeah, and thank you to Rob Walker for coming up with the 20 questions, and thank you, Robert Fithen, for making the video that made me aware not only of the questions, going around, the little thread going around, but also of Rob Walker. I was unaware of Rob Walker's channel, and now I am. So there we go, and hopefully you guys had a little fun watching me show records, because that's what we do in these videos, right? Well, there you go. All right, well, thank you everybody for subscribing, if you have, but if you haven't, of course, you might want to consider subscribing, and if you do, click the little bell, because you're going to want notifications and all that kind of stuff. And well, of course, come back on Thursday, because Crystal Durant and Tommy Von Voigt are going to be here, and we're going to dig into our favorite singles of 1991. Yes, the 90s. We're going to get deep into the 90s, and, well, for better or for worse. All right, see you guys soon.